bisexual man, an out bisexual man. When did you discover that about yourself?
Well, now that's a whole other story because in 1970, something really radical in my life happened. I joined a retreat called Sandstone in Topanga Canyon outside Los Angeles, which was studying alternate lifestyles, and in particular open sexuality and honesty, sexual honesty. And so I joined the club and spent 3 years up there outside of LA and met some wonderful people, and among them was my friend Sally Binford, with whom I then lived for 10 years. And Sally and I had a completely equal relationship out of the Sandstone experience, because we decided that if we were going to live together after having experienced something like that, we were going to make that work for us. And she'd been married 3 times, I'd been married twice. At that time I was 44 years old and she was 46. And so when we decided to live together, it would have to be under different terms than we'd ever lived before, because she'd been subjected to marriage and I'd been subjected to marriage and the whole heterosexual scene and everything, and it seemed quite ordinary until I got to Sandstone. And so we decided to look about in our lives and to find out what we hadn't yet experienced and what we thought would be exciting. And that's when Sally said to me, well, you've had some homosexual experiences in your life, of course, which I certainly had in prep school and a few things like that. And she said, has it aroused any curiosity in you? And I said, of course it has. As a matter of fact, when I went to analysis, the first thing my doctor convinced me of was that I was a latent homosexual. You remember that joke back in those days? But anyway, I became curious enough, and Sally encouraged me, and so we decided, after spending a year back east in Vermont, where she was teaching at Goddard College, we came back to the West Coast, and she thought of a young friend of hers she'd known at Sandstone, a 23-year-old friend of ours, and we got in touch with him, and he, with a big smile, told me that he just got over his first homosexual experience, and that he was very excited about it himself and was curious. So sort of we took off on that theme, and the 3 of us managed to have a wonderful time together. In fact, at that time, Sally and I were both working for the National Sex Forum, which since then has become known as the Institute for Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco. And multimedia film is an outgrowth of the Institute, and they probably have the largest collection of pornographic and X-rated and sexual educational films and video in the world. And among those is one film called Closing the Circle, which Sally and our friend Peter and I did together, which is a bisexual film, educational film on bisexuality. And then in 1978, Sally and I both became members of the board of directors of, we were on the board of directors of the Bisexual Center here in San Francisco, which was very active back then in the mid-'70s and late '70s, and still is, of course, but I haven't lived here for quite a few years. This is the first time I've been back in, I guess, about 20 years, so I haven't been too active in the movement up here in San Francisco in the last few years, but I certainly was back in the '70s with Sally. And that's sort of how it all got started. So, yeah. And that's how I recognized, yes, of course I'm bisexual. In fact, I used to love to think of myself as gay, but I couldn't, because I never had a gay relationship. You know, I never actually lived with another man, the 2 of us together. And of course I lived with many women, so I just figured, well, I guess I'm not gay, but I'm politically gay. I always said that, you know, but then I realized, no, I'm bisexual, that's what it is. Yeah. So I settled for that, and I've been very happy with it ever since.
That's great. Yeah. Well, how did Hollywood take your bisexuality? Obviously you were
Well, now
out.
that was kind of interesting, because both Sally and I appeared in several chapters of Gay Talisa's best-selling book called Thy Neighbor's Wife, which is a really hodgepodge book about the history of sexuality in this country, but kind of fun to read. And Sally and I were both in that book extensively, which talked openly of our relationship and of our relationships with other people. And also I did the movie Closing the Circle with Sally and our friend Peter, a bisexual, explicitly bisexual film for multimedia and the Institute. And Sally and I lectured on sex and aging for 10 years in San Francisco and elsewhere, to medical groups, to nurses organizations, to any organizations at all in which social workers, people had to deal with other people's sexuality. We gave raps on sex and aging through those years. And so in all that, I never once had a person come up to me and say, you're an actor and you're doing those explicitly sexual films, you know, that kind of thing. Never had that happen to me, and I've always been kind of surprised by that. In fact, people said to me, are you trying to ruin your career doing this, you know, making a film on bisexuality when you're a big macho biker in movies and stuff like that? And I said, well, wait a minute now. As far as I'm concerned, that film, Closing the Circle, was probably one of the most exciting, wonderful films I think I've ever done in my life, in my career. So I would have a hard time understanding why that would be considered danger to my career. You know? So I've never had any real reaction to the fact that I'm openly bisexual. There's never seemed to be a problem about it, but I do understand that problems exist in that area, that's for sure, especially in the film community. You know, they still exist. Big problems, but gradually we're overcoming them, showing people the way.
Yeah.
As it were.